Hi everyone, my name is Yanjali. Today, I'm here to give you the technical education of Genian. Before we start to the technical session, I'm about to introduce this webinar. So after closing the sales webinar the last time, there were many feedback that you wanted to get the technical webinar. So to satisfy your requestment, I was planning to get you know how to set the policy and enforcement in the Genian admin console. Okay, let's start it. I have one simple question. So when it first comes to you about the setting policy in the Genian admin console, what do you think about that? I think you may think that there are too many buttons and choices in the UI, and plus you may also feel that because I think I'm lost because where I have to first start and what is what in each menu. So even the Genian team provided documentation and technical support via online, you may also feel that there is one point missing for fully understand the logic of the setting policy in the Genian admin console. So I'm going to drive this webinar to give you the to reduce your discontent about the setting policy in the Genian admin console. So in this webinar, I'd like to try a new approach that you have never experienced before. The first, basic and essential. Some of the menu and the buttons are made by Genian, so I'm going to explain what definitions are and why you should follow this way. And second, top priority. I also agree that there are many menu and the button and choices in the UI. So it may be very complex for you when you set the policy, uh, but you also know that these icon and the button choices are used for setting policy for the various feature, right? However, we don't have to learn all about them at the first time at once. No, so we are going to focus on learning the things we must learn. Third, setting policy. This is our final goal of this webinar. So uh, with the B, basic and essential, and the T, top priority, you can get the finally S, setting policy by your hands. So this webinar is targeting for your very entry levels of engineering in your company, plus pre-sales or sales in your company who are really willing to learn more about the Genian. We really welcome them too. So due to the COVID-19, there is a restriction visited your country and company for the education. So I hope that this education reduce the gap of the limitation. So I prepared 4 weeks of a technical session. So during the first and second week, we will look at it and focus basic definition and the rule for setting policy. And during the third and 4 weeks, we will directly practice the actual user case in the UI. Okay, let's start the first session. The first session is titled The Basic Definition and the Rules for Setting Policy in Genian, the first part. So what we learned from the session 1 is the policy, the menu of the policy. And I will only focus sub-menu and the sub-feature in the policy menu. So the approach that I wanted to use here is telling you the history and the background, such as why you should click this button and why you should step this way, which has not been told you yet. So I hope that this approach help you solve your question and doubt during you setting a policy in the Genian admin console. As I mentioned earlier, I want to try a new approach in this webinar. So please take a look at the slide. There is 6 icons. This is the flow that I made content in this webinar. So first icon is the role. I'm going to explain the role of the policy. And the second, requirement. Some of the menu icon buttons, they have their own requirement we should have to follow. So if you miss to learn about these things, you couldn't move forward to set the policy by your hand. So it is almost similar to memorize your mathematic formula. Third icon is definition. So menu buttons choices are defined by Genian. So I'm going to explain the definitions and meaning, but I only focused the things we must learn. First icon is the user case. So based on this learning flow, we will practice the actual user case in the UI. The last one is the vocabulary and tips. They are also very helpful to learning about the logic of the setting policy. Okay, let's take a look at each one by one. Before doing that, there is the one common thing all of a slide from here. So it is the pattern. So please take a look at the top of the menu. There is the word of the policy in the pink box. You can see that, right? So as I say that, we only focus the policy menu in this webinar. And let's move to the left side. There is a 4 icon. And I have highlighted one icon that I wanted to say about now. Okay, let's check the role, the policy role. The policy, you can create it, apply that policy to your devices very quickly. So with the policy, you can identify, analyze, and respond to your broad range of the network activity. And Genian provided 2 types of the policy. The first one, predefined policy, which has been already made by Genian's team. These policies are disabled by default in the UI. So if you are the first time of the Genian I recommend you that please try to test fully inside it and make them this policy active later. And the other one is your own policy, which is created by your own plan in compliance with your company regulation. So after how to set the policy by your hands, you can fully enjoy the feature like the IPAM, user authentication, and ITSM management, and device health check, and mandatory software install and running. So we are going to practice this feature in the session 3 and 4. Okay, let's move to the requirement. In the policy menu, there are some features. Please take a look at the middle of the slide. I have already highlighted a box. So sub menus are node policy, and enforcement policy. They have their own requirement we should have to follow. So let's check that each one by one. Before doing that, I think some of you have already recognized it. The highlighted icon has been changed from the role to requirement. You have already recognized it, right? Okay, let's check that the directory of the node. Node menu is a directory. The main menu of the policy up there, top over there, and its sub menu is the group, and it's very below. There is node menu up there. Let's take a look at what you can do in the node menu. In the node menu, you can make the group. I mean the endpoint of the collection of the endpoint, such as devices, user, AP, access point. So the group can be an object to be monitored, to be controlled by Genian. So to make it a lot more easier, do you remember we have learned the Genian network sensor on the sales webinar? So after deployment of the network sensor start to detect all of the IP devices which are attempting to access the corporate network. And after detection, the detected devices and its devices information can be a group. So we call them as the node. Okay, let's check that what requirement we should have to follow in the node menu. Genian NAC divided into two different groups in the node menu. First one is policy group and the other one is a status group. So at this moment, you're getting to wondering what is what and why they are divided into two groups. Okay, I'm going to start to explain one by one. First one is what is what? The policy group in the node. The policy group is the node information which are fixed one. For example, IP and MAC address and device type. For example, PC and smartphone print and authorized user, I mean the user ID, and business departments such as HR, sales and marketing. And this information can be a group, especially policy group. And the other one is the status group. Status group is about the node condition, which are versatile. I mean that is very easily changeable. For example, if devices antivirus installed and running, and if devices Windows security setting has been done, or if devices has been met with the company compliant, this information can be a status group in the node. Okay, let's move to the why they are divided into two groups in the node menu. So before telling that, I want to share a story of the how important of the creating smart policy. Smart policy allowed you manage your broad range of network events. So you should define smart policy very carefully. In other words, what is a way to create smart policy? Personally, I wanted to recommend you, once you set the policy, to think from the big to specific. Like before you set the policy in the Genian admin console, you may have decided the general goal, which you wanted to achieve by Genian net or any types of the net. And then you needed to make this goal into the requirement. And the next step, the requirement should be translated into the policy. So with following this flow, you will find out who is or what is going to be a target for the group. So I prepared one example to make it a lot more easier. So let's say that you are IT manager. And so recently, there are many visitors to try to access your business network. So it is very risky, right? Because there are a lot of critical information and critical applications. So it's very a little bit risky to open to all of them. So you decided the general goal of the control access of the guests who are trying to access into the company network. And the next step, you make this goal into the requirement. Like the restrict the guests who are trying to access into the company network. And the next step, this requirement should be translated into the policy. Like the guest devices are denied the access, but internet only. So with this policy story, you can identify who is or what is going to be a group. So in this policy, guest group can be a group, right? Normally the guest group is recognized by its own IP or specifically subnet range. So let's go back to the genius way of the policy way. Once you have decided to make the group, your first step, move to the node menu. In the node menu, you can choose that either policy group or status group. So in this case, you have already know about the information of the IP and subnet. So in this case, you can make the group as the title of policy group in the node. If you're still confused or complex about it, but no worry about it, because we are going to practice this policy in this section 3 and section 4. I'm sorry, there is a little bit emergency thing happens up here, so I think nobody is just acting here. This light is off, so I'm going to move out to hand up, lines off. Please turn on the rise up. This is live. Sorry, please hold a minute. Yeah, I'm back. I'm back here. So I'm sorry, I was confused about that. So why don't we have some to check about our live chat? Because the I think some of us start to read your question or any comment about the Q&A on the our live chat room. Yeah, okay, there is only have some notice up there. Okay, it doesn't matter. Because the after closing the session 1, we're gonna have a live Q&A session. So please leave your question on the chat room, and then we're gonna have a short time of the Q&A session after that. Please leave your question, opinion, any ideas on the chat room. Okay, let's start the next one. Second requirement is node policy. So the node policy directory is that the main menu is the policy and its sub menu is a policy. I'm sorry, it is the same name, but the second one is not the third one. Anyway, the policies sub menu is the node policy. First, we needed to check what you can do in the node policy. In the node policy, you can create the set of policy for seeing the device visibility inside it. And the devices only can be from the policy group you have already made it in the node menu. Let's check that what requirement you should have to follow here. Please take a look at the one captured image up here. So this is one of the flow once you set the policy in the node policy. And the node policy make you choose that or select the group for the set for the policy. So in this case, in the node policy, you only select or choose the group of the policy group. Still confused, right? A little bit difficult, but why don't we think about this way? Because you know, before you control devices or before you control something, you wanted to check what the problem inside it, or you needed to know what looks like in the current conditions, right? So after seeing that, you finally decided which kind of enforcement and control should be come with it, right? So in this case, you needed to move to the node policy and set the policy. I mean that node policy give you the information, the correcting the information of the group, and the group only can be a policy group you have made it in the node. That is the requirement of the node policy. Okay, let's move to the enforcement policy requirement. Enforcement policy is located in the main menu of the policy, and its sub-menu of the policy as well, and its sub-menu and enforcement policy. So let's check that what you can do in the enforcement policy. So enforcement policy, you can create it as setting a policy for is the final decision. So finally you wanted to decide it, okay, I'm going to allowing this group, or I'm going to denying this group, or redirecting this group. This is the final step. And the group only can be or both of the policy group and status group, or either one of them. Next slide, I'm going to explain more detail. So please take a look at the one captured image, the box image. This is one of the flow of the enforcement policy. So during you setting a policy in the enforcement policy asks you what kind of the group you wanted to select. So you can choose both of them, like the policy group or status group, or either one of them. And then this group can be a target. which can allow it access to the inside it, or which are denied it, or which can be redirect to access to your company network. This is the final step. This is the requirement you should have to follow here. We are almost reach out to the session 1. So there are too many vocabulary and meanings flying all of us here, right? So you may be still confused or what the meanings of that. But it's okay. If you could not understand 100% all of the word, it does not really matter. But please remember 4 keywords for today. They are policy group, status group, and node policy, and enforcement policy. So once you have decided, make the group for the policy, you first move to the node policy, node group, and in the node menu, allow you to choose the either policy group and status group. And then after you're making the group, you needed to check what visibility inside it in each group. You first move to the node policy. And the node policy allowed you seeing inside of your group. After checking your group's visibility, and the next step, you move to the enforcement policy, finally deciding if you wanted to allowing, denying, redirect your group. So this is for content for session 1. I highly appreciated you joining for today, and also you enjoyed it, content for today as well.